Welcome to the Global WarWatch Network.
It's great to be here.
So we're tackling something heavy today. Genocide accusations have become, well, a powerful weapon of war, haven't they?
They absolutely have. Extremely potent.
And the question we're asking is, are today's claims against Israel repeating the same mistakes, maybe the same patterns the U.S. faced in Iraq, where false statistics ended up shaping global opinion?
That's the core of it, yeah.
So this conversation is really about understanding how these incredibly strong accusations, especially genocide, can get tangled up with, well, manipulated data.
Right.
And how looking back at historical patterns can maybe shed some light, sometimes an uncomfortable light, on what's happening right now. We're digging into a recent analysis from the Council on Foreign Relations on this.
Exactly. And our mission really is to walk you through how statistical manipulation was such a critical factor back then with the Iraq sanctions accusations. And then crucially, connect that to what the analysis sees as a, remarkably similar approach, a similar modus operandi in the claims being made against Israel today.
Based on that CFR analysis.
Precisely. The whole idea is to give you, the listener, the context, the tools maybe, to critically evaluate the information flying around. It's such a fast-moving landscape out there.
It really is. Arming people to see the difference between fact and, well, sometimes strategic fiction.
That's the goal.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack this. Maybe start by looking back. The 1990s, the situation in Iraq.
Yeah.
You said it's a critical precedent.
It really is. It sets the stage.
So what were those initial accusations back then? And who was actually making them?
Well, the big one, the really grave accusation, was genocide. And surprisingly, it wasn't leveled against Saddam Hussein initially, but against the United States and other UN Security Council members.
Against the U.S. and the UN Security Council. Wow.
Yeah, and this came in 1999 from Dennis Halliday. Now, he wasn't some minor official. He was a UN Assistant Secretary General at the time.
Right.
A veteran, 34 years in the UN system. He'd been the humanitarian coordinator for the Oil for Food program in Iraq just before that, from 97 to 98.
So someone with serious credentials, deeply involved, that carries weight.
Absolutely. It lent significant credibility to his claims.
And what was the specific charge? What did he actually say?
His charge was blunt. He said UN economic sanctions were, and this is a direct quote, deliberately, knowingly killing thousands of Iraqis each month.
Deliberately?
Knowingly, yes. And he explicitly stated this fit the definition of genocide.
Wow.
And it wasn't just a one-off comment either. He repeated it in 2003. His stance actually earned him the Gandhi Foundation's Peace Award.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And even now, some organizations, like the Geneva International Center for Justice, still call the sanctions a genocidal siege.
So the accusation had legs. It persisted.
It definitely did. And the source, Halliday's position and experience, made it immediately believable to many.
Okay, so a huge accusation like that needs proof, right?
Yeah.
What was the evidence presented back then? The proof for these claims of genocide, especially impacting children.
Right. The initial proof largely came from surveys and studies, seemingly official ones.
Right.
There was a really important UNICEF demographic survey in 1991. It reported, quote, a huge increase in the under 5 death rate in Iraq between 1990 and 91.
A huge increase.
Yeah, and claimed these really high rates just continued. Then the media picked it up, amplified it. The New York Times ran a story, July 93, quoting a UNICEF official. Saying infant mortality had quadrupled in 1991. They blamed malnutrition, lack of medicine, directly linking it to the sanctions.
Quadruple, that's a staggering number.
It is. And it wasn't just UNICEF.
Were there other UN reports backing this up, reinforcing this picture?
Yes, exactly. Other UN reports added to this narrative. There was the 1991 Ahtisaari report.
Ahtisaari.
It described near-apocalyptic results. It warned of an imminent catastrophe for Iraqis, think epidemic, famine, if huge amounts of aid didn't arrive quickly.
So you had this convergence, UN reports, UNICEF data, media coverage, all pointing the finger at the sanctions causing massive death.
Precisely. It created this very strong, unified, and frankly alarming narrative.
Okay, those initial reports sound absolutely devastating, but the first reports aren't always the last word, especially in complex situations. What happened when people looked closer later on? Did those numbers hold up?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, quite disturbing. The truth that emerged years later was starkly different.
Oh, so.
Independent studies conducted well over a decade later just didn't find the same thing. The analysis we're discussing points to a key article in the BMJ, that's the British Medical Journal, it used to be called that.
Okay, BMJ.
And the article title says a lot. Changing Views on Child Mortality and Economic Sanctions in Iraq. A History of Lies, Damned Lies, and Statistics.
Lies. Damned lies and statistics. Wow, they didn't pull any punches. So what did the BMJ find?
Their investigation led them to conclude, pretty definitively, that the newer, more reliable surveys showed, quote, no sign of a huge and enduring rise in the under 5 death rate starting in 1991.
No sign. So the initial UNICEF figures were wrong.
Massively wrong. And according to the BMJ, it wasn't just an error. They concluded Saddam Hussein's government had successfully manipulated the 1999 survey.
Manipulated it.
How? They apparently cleverly manipulated survey data to fool the international community. The BMJ article flat out calls it an especially masterful fraud.
A masterful fraud. Orchestrated by the Iraqi government.
That's what the later investigation concluded. So this data, accepted as fact, driving international debate for years, was deliberate deception.
That's incredible. A state-sponsored deception fooling UN agencies and the world. But how? How did it get so much traction, even within parts of the UN, if it was ultimately fake?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it speaks volumes about how information works or doesn't work. The CFR analysis emphasizes that the deception worked, it gained credence, largely because it fit what many already believed.
What they wanted to believe.
Kind of. It fit the widespread view that the UN's economic sanctions were wrong. There was already this strong feeling, this narrative out there that the sanctions were unjust. The fake statistics just seemed to confirm it.
Confirmation bias on a global scale.
You could say that. And what's more, the BMJ article pointed out something else crucial. The UN bureaucracy itself at that time was internally fighting against UN sanctions.
So elements within the UN were predisposed to accept negative data about the sanctions.
It seems so. It created an environment where this manipulated data wasn't just accepted passively. It aligned with internal political views, maybe even got amplified because it did.
Right.
The BMJ drew a simple lesson. Statistics generated in situations conditioned by conflict and strong political contestation should always be interpreted with great care.
Sage advice. It's not just the numbers. It's the context, the politics, the biases surrounding them.
Absolutely. Context is everything.
So this brings us crashing into the present day. The analysis argues this same dynamic manipulated stats, fitting a preferred narrative, is playing out now with accusations against Israel and Gaza. Is that the core parallel?
That is precisely the parallel the analysis draws. It points to a very similar pattern, a similar modus operandi.
Which is?
Accusations of genocide, again, the use of what the analysis calls invented and manipulated statistics, and very strong emotive language, especially about children, all seemingly aimed at achieving political goals.
Okay, similar pattern, but you mentioned the difference.
Yes, a key difference in the alleged actors, according to the analysis. In Iraq, you had parts of the UN bureaucracy fighting UN policy, the sanctions. In Gaza, the analysis claims UN agencies and bureaucrats are now effectively fighting against Israel.
Interesting shift in the target.
But the alleged method, using potentially deceptive data to push a narrative, is seen as strikingly similar. And the source of the current statistics in question...
Who does the analysis point to?
It states the primary source is Hamas, operating under the guise of the Gaza Ministry of Health.
Hamas, masquerading as the Ministry of Health. That's a strong claim.
Yeah.
Can you give a concrete, recent example of how this alleged pattern is showing up right now?
Sure. The analysis highlights a New York Times story from August 22nd this year. Headline was, Gaza City and surrounding areas are officially under famine, monitors say.
Okay, I think I remember seeing that.
In that story, a top UN humanitarian official, Undersecretary General Tom Fletcher, is quoted, and the analysis says he was essentially attacking Israel.
What did he say specifically?
Fletcher stated the famine was, quote, openly promoted by some Israeli leaders as a weapon of war.
Openly promoted as a weapon of war? That's incredibly serious language from a UN Undersecretary General.
Extremely serious.
And what's the critique of that statement in the CFR analysis? How do they push back on that?
The critique is quite pointed. The analysis notes that in that whole NYT article, featuring Fletcher's quote, there wasn't, quote, one single word of criticism of Hamas.
Nothing about Hamas.
Nothing mentioned about Hamas looting aid, or about UN agencies allegedly refusing to cooperate with alternative aid distributors like the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Instead, Fletcher's narrative, as presented, was solely focused on Israel.
What was his explanation, then?
He claimed the only issue was food stacks up at borders because of systematic obstruction by Israel.
Okay.
The analysis argues this is truly reminiscent of the reports of UN officials about Iraq. It frames it as part of what it calls decades of grossly unfair treatment of Israel by UN bureaucrats and agencies.
So, a historical pattern of perceived bias.
That's the argument. The author even makes this provocative suggestion, asking Fletcher, who is British, to compare the food Britain shipped into Germany during World War I and II versus what Israel is shipping into Gaza now.
A stark comparison to challenge the narrative of deliberate starvation.
Exactly. It's meant to force a perspective shift on scale and intent.
So, connecting this back, the analysis questions the reliability of the figures from Hamas, acting as the health ministry. But why do these figures still get so much play in Western media?
Well, the analysis argues that Hamas's abuse of statistics isn't exactly a secret. It mentions reports from places like the Henry Jackson Society, the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, that have documented this manipulation.
So there are other sources questioning the numbers.
Yes. But despite that, the analysis says these Hamas-sourced figures continue to be cited daily by Western media, and the reason given? It echoes the Iraq situation perfectly.
Let me guess. Because they fit a narrative.
Precisely. Because they fit the widespread view that Israel's actions are wrong. It's that receptiveness, that will to believe a certain narrative, that allows questionable data to gain traction and be repeated as fact.
And the analysis predicts future vindication, similar to Iraq.
It does. It suggests quite strongly that just like with Iraq, we'll likely see studies a decade from now confirming that there wasn't a genocide in Gaza and that the Gaza Ministry of Health numbers were indeed fabricated.
That's a sobering thought that the truth might only come out much later. So what's the immediate impact? If these claims, these numbers are designed for the now, what effect are they having right now, even if their leader disproven?
That's the crucial point, isn't it? The immediate impact is the entire goal. These old, fallacious numbers, the genocide accusations, the claims of deliberate starvation attributed to Israel, they're not meant to stand up to historical studies. They're not designed for academic review years down the line.
They're for now.
Exactly. Their purpose is to change opinion now, and thereby to force changes in government policy now. And the analysis argues it's working.
How so? What are the signs?
It points to examples like the leaders of Canada, Britain, Australia, the president of France, all openly talking about recognizing a Palestinian state, potentially at the UN General Assembly this September.
So, real-world political shifts potentially driven by these narratives.
That's the implication, that these narratives, fueled by contested data, are already influencing international diplomacy and policy decisions. The will to believe is translating into action.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it? The power of information or misinformation in real time. So for you listening, grappling with this, what's the takeaway? How should you process this kind of information in these heated conflicts?
I think it brings us back to that fundamental lesson, the one the BMJ highlighted after Iraq. Statistics generated in situations conditioned by conflict and strong political contestation should always be interpreted with great care. Extreme caution is needed.
Be skeptical, basically.
Be critical. Ask questions. Where does the data come from? Who benefits from this narrative? Is there an opposing view? But it also raises maybe a deeper, more uncomfortable question.
Which is?
Perhaps the real lesson about these kinds of accusations, these phony genocide claims, is simply that they work when enough people want to believe them, when there's a sufficiently widespread will to believe.
That's quite a thought. It puts the onus not just on the source of the information, but on the audience, on all of us and our own biases.
It really does. It forces us to examine not just the data, but the climate it lands in, and maybe our own readiness to accept certain stories.
Thank you. That was a really insightful look at a complex and, frankly, troubling issue. Connecting the dots between Iraq and the current situation really highlights the importance of critical analysis.
Absolutely. And we hope this conversation gives you, our listeners, some valuable context, tools maybe, to better analyze the information and the narratives you encounter, especially when conflict is involved.
Understanding these patterns, the potential for manipulation, the will to believe, it's vital for navigating the world today.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, we really appreciate your time and participation in this discussion today. If you found this valuable, please do like, share, and subscribe to Global WarWatch Network. It helps us bring more insights like this.
And please share your thoughts. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and join the conversation on our social media channels. You'll find all the links right there in the description.